Hello and welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us today. This is Moneyline with Nancy, and I am Nancy Naji. Today we will be taking another look at the fuel subsidy removal. Just a few days ago, the Finance Ministry came up with a statement to say that the finance minister did not say that the fuel subsidy is being suspended, that what it did say was that the committee will be expanded. What does this mean really for the country, especially as the nation bleeds from fuel subsidy cost? You will recall that fuel subsidy issues did not just start today. It started in the 70s, and there have been attempts upon various attempts to take off the subsidy, to reform the sector, to bring in more efficiency, yet nothing seems to be happening. We will be discussing it in a jiffy with my guests. I'll be having two important aspects here that will discuss with me in a bit. That will be after the break. Do connect with us, as you can see on the screen, with us on our various social media accounts. You can check us out on Facebook. If you're not following us on any of our social media handles, please do well to do that right now on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on Instagram. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Moneyline. All right, welcome back to the program. It's still Moneyline with Nancy on African Independent Television. My guests are with me right now virtually. George Etomi is the chairman, West Power and Gas, as well as Dr. Bola Digunwu is the partner and West Africa Economic Advisory Leader at Deloitte and Touche. Welcome to you both. Dr. Adigun, thank you for joining us. I love that smile you opened with this morning. Mr. Tommy, can you give me a smile too? So we're starting to, even though we're going to be talking serious issues in the next few seconds. So welcome to you both today. Now let's get started. The finance minister did talk about the fuel subsidy just a few days ago. Many Nigerians misread, according to the statement from the ministry, I think a day later or so, misread that statement. Many Nigerians thought that the federal government has suspended the fuel subsidy removal plan. Let me start with you, Mr. Tomi. What do you understand now by what the minister has said, that the committee has been expanded and the work is now for the new administration?
Good morning, Nancy, and good morning, Bola. Nice to meet you guys here. Clearly, we don't have a choice in the matter. We always knew that removal of fuel subsidies is going to be one of the very difficult but necessary decisions that has to be taken by the incoming administration. Just like you said in your opener, this has been on the front burner for quite a while. And I don't see us getting away from it. We simply can't afford it any longer. We're collapsing under the weight of the subsidy. We're overborrowed as a nation. And most importantly, it is actually numbing the genius in us because it's freebies, as it were. It's not letting us unleash the genius that I know is in us as Nigerians to look at alternative ways of dealing with this issue of subsidy. There are so many other things we can do with the savings from subsidy that can be directed at productivity, which will then improve the earning power of Nigerians. And this is really where the conversation should be taking us to. We've stayed for too long at this feeding bottle, and honestly speaking, we need to move on.
Dr. Bola, what are your own views concerning this fuel subsidy? Like I mentioned at the opening, we've been talking about fuel subsidies at least since the 1970s, at least the introduction in the 1970s or so, and removal has been on the front burner for many years. Different administrations have tried to remove it but have been so unsuccessful they've been opposed, stiff opposition. In fact, members of this government, including even the president, opposed the removal of this subsidy in 2012 when President Jonathan was there. Why do you think that this is such a sticky issue all the time that is being raised?
Okay, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be on your show, Nancy. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Itomi. I think this subsidy matter needs to be addressed once and for all. And no matter how sticky it may appear to be, um, I think it's good to put in context the magnitude of what we're talking about. Nigeria consumes about 68 million liters of petrol daily. For January to June this year, they're already budgeting about 3.6 trillion naira as subsidy. Nigeria cannot sustain uh, they cannot sustain physically or economically to continually to provide subsidy for fuel. Um, so the minister had mentioned that they've expanded the committee to include members of the incoming administration, which means that the plan, according to the finance minister, is still to remove subsidy by June 2023, which is next month. Um, Now, do we think that Nigeria is ready for this? I believe that I'm a proponent of removal of subsidy. In the short term, yes, it's going to be difficult for the average Nigerian, especially the vulnerable groups. But I think in the long term, if the savings from subsidy removal are properly and judiciously invested into critical infrastructure, into critical areas of capex requirements of the state of Nigeria as a whole, I think in the long run, Nigeria will be better for it. In the short term, yes, it will be difficult, it will be expensive because you can see an instant multiplier effect of removal of subsidy in the price of goods and services. But it's an issue that needs to be addressed. Whether it's addressed now or in the next 6 months is something that needs to be addressed by the government. Thank you.
Mm. Okay, Mr. Tommy, I would like to bring you in here again. And I always like that this show should be as simplified as possible. You know, it should be explainer 101 on any issue that we are talking about, because I don't want to be caught in between the complexity of the whole of everything we're talking about. That is one thing this show is known for. Can you explain what this free subsidy is? You know, let's start from basics. So that, because a market woman now in Wuse or Balogun or even in the rural area and is saying fuel subsidy, I don't know what that they talk. What did these people they talk? You know, can you just explain what
Yeah,
these people they talk, what it means? And
I'm happy to break it down for you. Now, what we know is that the average cost of PMS, which is the people call petrol, in Nigeria is about between 140, 165 and perhaps 240 naira per liter. That's what they say. If they remove the subsidy, they tell you that that price will go up to as high as 460, 470. So there is a subsidy element of about 275 naira per liter. If you multiply that by if you then say, let's look at somebody who buys 50 liters of fuel a week. 297 by 50 gives you 14,850. That means the government is subsidizing you to that tune every week. If you multiply it by 4, that figure goes up to just under 60,000 naira. And then for 52 weeks, that's 1 year. That figure jumps to over 772,000 naira. So that is what, in fact, the government is doling out to every Nigerian for that. And the issue then becomes, how sustainable is that, especially given the fact that we do not have accurate numbers based upon which these subsidies are being applied. For example, you hear that we consume 68 million liters a day. Some recently published figures put that at 80 million.
80 million, yeah.
Yes, 80 million. So you keep hearing different things. So the first problem inherent in the fuel subsidy thing is lack of transparency. And that is where a lot of the abuse takes place. You need to understand how the subsidy regime works. And one of the elements of subsidy is this issue of petroleum equalization. In other words, if fuel sells for 168 in Lagos, the idea is that it should be able to sell for the same 168 in Maiduguri. So the transporters who have to take fuel from Lagos to Maiduguri are given a subsidy element to cover their transportation costs, so that when it gets to Maiduguri, it can sell about the same thing. Now, this is as uneconomic as you can get, because for those of you who know, and for many of us who have lived in the north, I did my service in Kaduna, I cannot remember a single time we bought fuel for the same price as it was in Lagos. So that means somebody somewhere is abusing it. They are collecting the money, but they're not delivering the goods. In some instances, we're told once they load these trucks, they just ferry them right across to a neighboring country where fuel is being sold at international prices. So it's double whammy. Nigerians don't benefit from it. So I'm not surprised that your market woman is wondering what's going on here. And then the middlemen, the heavy hitters, then make a lot of those monies. And if I give you a simple comparison of costs, in Ghana, let's take a neighboring country. Ghana fuel sells for about the equivalent of 500 naira. In Togo, it's about 540. Cameroon is about 563. These are neighbors. Benin Republic sells in excess of 500. So it means that anytime you buy it cheaper here and you're able to ferret it across your borders, you will make a handsome killing. So the very intent of government to ease the lives of Nigerians is not actually manifesting because of this abuse. So why, for the sake of a few greedy people, allow an unsustainable system of economy to go on? Meanwhile, this is being done at the expense of your ability to build infrastructure, roads, railways, power, these sort of things that can actually lead to productivity. After all, development is driven by movement of people. So if people can move easily between their places, they can trade their wares, they can do commerce, generally speaking, then the earning power of Nigerians will improve, and it will be absolutely unrecognizable that there is no longer fuel subsidy. And remember, we deregulated diesel some years ago, and people who run diesel and their businesses just simply add it to their cost, and people live with it. But it is when we mention taking out the PMS subsidy that everybody goes up in arms. So it is actually important that it's taken out, but the manner in which it's going to be taken out, it's important. Just like the way you feed your child. When you want to wean your child off breast milk, you don't just suddenly stop abruptly. You just do it gradually. And I would always stand for some form of phased subsidy. Don't drag it out for too long, because any time there's subsidy, there's arbitrage and there will be abuse. But it's got to be done, or we need to cushion the effect on Nigerians.
Okay, let's take a look at the transparency of the process. And Dr. Adigun, can you come in here? Mr. Tommy has talked about the transparency of the process, assuming that the process is transparent and we really know how many liters we consume daily, we really know how much we spend on fuel subsidy. Do you think that we would have gotten to this point, assuming that there was no supposed corruption in the process? Because if you take a look at it, some other oil-producing countries, not all oil-producing countries have removed subsidies for their citizens. I think some of the MENA countries have energy subsidies for their citizens. So assuming we have the transparency right, the cost effectiveness well laid out, a framework that everybody understands, do you think that we would have gotten to this point? And do you think that perhaps Nigeria can actually also afford the subsidy?
So The reality of the matter is that a large part of the problem we have today is the lack of transparency. Um, if, for example, and a case in point is diesel, for example. There's a huge dispute as to the quantum of petrol we consume as a country, right? There's a dispute between NNPC, the customs, to say how much of diesel, how much of petrol does Nigeria consume. We've seen different numbers being thrown around: 80 million liters, 68 million liters, whatever the number is. The lack of transparency is one of the big problems that this industry has. And that's also part of the reason why the expected benefit of the significant cost of subsidy is not getting to the average man on the street of Oshodi. The expected benefit of this subsidy is not getting to the average man in the market in Balogun, right? In which case, which which is why I am a proponent of removal of subsidy. Like the way you have the prices of diesel currently floating based on the demand and supply dynamics. I think it's high time that we have the same thing for petrol, but it can be in a phased manner, because we know how dependent Nigerians are on petrol. And unfortunately, or fortunately, some of the policies of the government to ensure energy transition or energy mix have not been fully efficient or effective yet. Um, so the lack of transparency, the lack of appropriate data to say, okay, how much of petrol is being imported into this country, how much of this is being consumed locally, how much of it is being smuggled to neighboring countries to get a margin because of the arbitrage. All of this data or facts contribute to the reason why I believe that it's high time we remove subsidy and let the prices be determined by the supply and demand dynamics. Let there be a level playing ground for the average businessman to say, okay, do I want to go into the downstream sector in Nigeria? Do I want to get into importation, or do I want to get into local refining? We have capacity to refine petrol locally. You don't have we don't have to go the size of Dangote refinery, for example. You can have your 5,000 barrel per day topping plant or modular refinery in different parts of the country. So I believe that the lack of transparency and the corruption in that entire value chain has contributed to where we currently are. And it's high time that the country needs to change the course, because it cannot be business as usual. We do not have the finance to continue to fund this heavy burden. Nigeria is already into significant debt, and it's not sustainable to continue to fund subsidy that is not. You can't even measure the real impact on the average Nigerian. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Adigun, let me stick with you before I come to Mr. Tommy. Do you also think that we get to hear all the time about fuel subsidy whenever fiscal pressures are high? Because I've noticed a trend is when Nigeria doesn't have money, that you will get you will get to Mr. Tommy, isn't it? Yeah. At least I've been doing this for quite a while. So I've been studying the trends too. It's only when Nigeria doesn't have money. You hear the finance ministers during Okonjo-Iweala and Sanusi as governor, oh, the two of them were going, I interviewed them at that point, oh, remove the subsidy. Emir Mohammed Sanusi said, oh, no, this thing is bad for us. NNPC hasn't remitted. You see, because we cannot afford it. Is it when fiscal pressures are high, when we are under pressure, that we get to hear fuel subsidy? Or is this situation also different? Bearing in mind that we've seen that all prices have been on the increase close to $100 at least in the last 2 years or so, but we've not gotten anything from it. So situate that for me, Dr. Adigun.
Okay, so I think it's a mix of both. Nigeria is under significant financial pressure. You have declining revenue, and then you have significant debt burden that you have to service. So Nigeria has a lot of debt, a lot of finance pressure. And then if you have this significant amount of finance pressure and you have these huge uh, obligation that you know you can do away with. So yes, like you rightly pointed out, as as often as Nigeria has fiscal pressures, the issue of subsidy always comes up. I think also now is a fantastic time to raise this issue as well, as we have an incoming government. Is to then see if there is the political will and the economic will to do the right thing in regards to subsidy. So I think your answer is correct. The current administration of President Muhammadu Buhari at different times raised the issue of subsidy, and but they were unable to actually make any significant mileage with regards to, are we removing it? Is it going to be in a phased approach? What are the initial steps that needs to be done to ensure that we're able to remove this successfully? Now that we have a new government coming in, I know for certain that Ashiwaju's think tank group have been going through the pros and cons of subsidy. Do we remove it? How do we have to, what is the implementation? How do we cushion the effect? How do we ameliorate the effect of that to the average Nigerian? I think that answered your question, Nancy.
Okay, Mr. Tommy, will the likely removal, because I know I've spoken to many experts, the ministers, everybody, for how many years, Nancy, let's remove this subsidy. Now, if we want to bite the bullet and say, okay, will the likely removal of this subsidy promote investment in the downstream sector? Will it also promote competition? Will it bring about cost-effective distribution of products? Will we see fair pricing? Because everyone is saying, let the market take its role. Let people come in. Let businessmen and women come in and run this show. Do you think it will give us all of this? Bearing in mind, I'm taking diesel. Let's take diesel for it. As
Yeah.
an example, diesel is there. How much is diesel now? Dr. Adigu is laughing. You know where I'm going to. In fact, both of you know where I'm going to. So, Mr. Tommy, please answer.
Nancy, the problem with subsidy, because it is a closed knit affair, there will always be abuse by those who are privileged to be the ones administering it, and their cronies. So whenever you release the system and you allow other players come in, definitely the playing field will level, the opportunities will increase, there will be greater participation, there will therefore be um, service that will come along with it. Today, I think the sole importer of PMS is the NNPC. I mean, how does that happen? If you open the field and you allowed others to come in, there'll be greater participation, just to answer the question. And so many things will then go into what then becomes your PMS price, your transport efficiency, your general technological advancements, and all that. The way ordinary businesses run. So if you go to buy anything in any supermarket, depend on the location, what they're offering you, how they've gotten their raw materials and co. The prices vary. It is only here we try to have a uniform pricing mechanism for things that simply defy economic logic. So the answer is clear that once you level the playing field, it will lead to greater participation by different people in businesses. And anytime you have competition, prices may generally come down. And let us all look at telecoms. When you had a good old NITEL and you had no choice from anybody else, we knew what happened. When the big boys came into the picture, first MTN, then what is now Airtel and Glow and all that, the competition amongst them led to loads and loads of offerings. And the ultimate beneficiaries were the masses. There was a time they were giving per minute billing because they gave the impression there was nothing else they could do. Challenge came, suddenly per second billing showed up in the picture. You could not get a SIM card in those days except you paid 50K. Now they're chasing you around with SIM cards. That is the benefit of competition. We need to open up that space. Where I think we got it wrong was when Nigeria started benefiting from enhanced oil prices, and I think it was in the dying days of the Gowon regime, that was when we should have actually channeled those excess funds into infrastructural development. Instead, we try to dole it out as direct cash benefits to people. Then the dodgy thing came, we quadrupled the salaries of people. So we basically just whet people's appetite for luxuries that were not sustainable. Okay, they say hindsight is 2020 vision. And the best time to do something was yesterday, but the next best time is tomorrow. We are where we are today. There's no argument amongst experts, amongst economists, everybody, that the removal of subsidy is a no-brainer today. How do you then do it? In a manner that cushions the effect on Nigerians, but critically empowers them to then improve on their economic well-being, their earning power, so that they can deal with these challenges. One, for my money, is power. Power is so critical to the diversification of this economy. We cannot say it enough. Many people who today, I mean, PMS is used for to do power. If you had a good power system, that cost can be saved. Um, if you deploy renewable solars to the rural areas, that market woman who doesn't understand what you're talking about. But if she's able to power her shop using solar and coal, she'll be happy, and people who have life generally are happy. You when you remove fuel subsidy, she will not be as hard a hit. It will essentially be those of us who drive luxury cars. And if you want to buy, if you want to enjoy luxury, you want to pay for it, then pay for it. I don't have a problem with it. But we must begin to redirect whatever we remove to the productive sector so that we can begin to engender economic activity in the system. This is what the country needs. And that's why I keep saying that the genius in the Nigerian will be unleashed the moment you remove all these distortions. These things that just make us lazy. If it's easier for me to know somebody, get a paper, and become a multi-billionaire, why would I go work hard? So those are the distortions we want to remove out of the system so that we can begin to do those things that will make Nigeria truly great.
Dr. Adigo, just a quick one. Mr. Tommy has talked about, and both of you actually agree on the phased removal of the subsidy. You also recall that the federal government has secured $800 million loan facility from the World Bank in order to do this. In fact, I must say loan now because it was in the media, I think, just a few days ago that it was a grant. I had to reach out to the World Bank country director himself just a few days ago. Please clarify for me what I'm hearing. Is it a loan or a grant? Because I don't understand what is happening. The federal government, is it saying grant or loan? And he clarified, and and he told me, fine, it's a loan. So the federal government has secured this $800 million facility. The federal government does think that it should reach out to the vulnerable 50 million Nigerians, about 10 million households. Do you think this is the right way to do it? How should that $800 million be spent? And how can the vulnerable be, how can this problem be alleviated with the vulnerable, assuming that this really goes on with the incoming administration? I hope that the incoming administration, the think tank, they are all thinking about how to how to do this, because there's a social political angle to this fuel subsidy removal, which we've seen over the years. And I did mention, was it last week on the show, this incoming administration supposedly is not popular, as it were, because you see that matters are in court right now. So how will it take off, make this economic decision that is not popular? You want to go against the people. So how do they balance that out? And how do they alleviate this on the vulnerable?
Okay. So on the $800 million, I actually did some findings as well. And yes, it's a loan and not a grant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's an additional $800 million loan on a sinking ship that has significant debt overhang. Does that paint a picture? And you are taking loan to fund consumption, not even to fund capex that will provide returns. That in itself is problematic. Now, the finance minister had mentioned that the loans is supposed to be like a cash transfer. It's going to be a cash transfer to vulnerable groups. So they're targeting 10 million households and 50 million Nigerians via that process. The same transparency and corruption problems comes to play. How do you ensure that the vulnerable groups, the poor and the needy that really require or need this financing are able to access it? What is the modality for transferring, for this cash transfer to ensure that really the vulnerable groups are the ones that get it and it doesn't get into the hands of the elites as we've seen in the past? That's one. Two, so they're saying $800 million facility to reduce the impact of the pain from fuel subsidy removal. Don't forget that this cash grant is a one-off thing, right?
Mm.
But the vulnerable group will still have to deal with prices that would have skyrocketed as a direct impact of the removal of subsidy. So I don't think it's a sustainable structure. Whatever the structure the government is going to use for the facility, the reality of the matter remains that in the short term, the removal of subsidy would be a painful thing to Nigerians. But I believe strongly that if the savings that we would make from this subsidy are applied in the right to, to the right critical infrastructural deficit that we have, they are used to fund, for example, proper road network, which will reduce our logistical challenges. I think in the long run, we will be better off. But in the short term, it's a pain that we'll have to face. Now, there are ways by which the government can ameliorate or reduce the impact of this of the removal. Like Mr. Itomi mentioned, if the removal is in a phased approach via proper consultation with the citizens, and looking at how the movement in the global crude prices would impact that, I think there needs to be a proper process for the removal so that you are able to ameliorate the impact. But I don't think that $800 million grant is going to achieve much. Why do I say that? If current estimate is that we spend about $5 billion annually on fuel subsidy, and you have a one-off grant of $800 million, the math speaks for itself. I don't think it's going to do much, but again, because of the unsustainable nature of continuing to fund this subsidy, it's a case of, oh, this is it, we just need to bite the bullet and then find a way to ensure that the impact is not too significant on citizens. There are ways you can look at. For example, the government needs to push energy mix. The government needs to push energy transition so that we sort of reduce our reliance on petrol. You need to have infrastructures that are working and not working efficiently, so that we're able to eliminate some of the inefficiencies and costs in that value chain. I think if you have all of these things in place, beyond just 800 million one-off grants, Nigerians are able to sort of accommodate the shock from the subsidy removal.
Mm. Mr. Tommy, do you have anything
Yeah,
to say concerning this?
yeah,
Yeah.
I do absolutely. I don't agree more with what Dr. Kigo has said. Throwing money at a problem has never cut it. We've had too many of these social intervention programs in which you throw money at a problem and it comes back even bigger because you have problems about transparency, effectiveness, and then you just make people lazy. If you have $800 million, please give it to the REA. Let them go there and begin to build solar plants for Nigerians in the rural areas so that they can at least power their little farms, power their SMEs businesses and all that, so that productivity actually, there's a beehive of productivity. That's what you really need. And then on the major savings from fuel subsidy, you begin to then, if you like, you can borrow against those ones. But so long as it is done in a very strict and regulated manner, you can then begin to build these interstate railways, big haulage carriage roads and co. Because like I said, it's people that bring about development. People must move. People want to do haulage business today in Nigeria. It's a nightmare. Move goods from Kano to Lagos or Lagos to Port Harcourt. It takes you 3-4 days and you pay myriads of taxes to so many people, different. It's just a pain to do business in Nigeria. Now, those are the areas where political will, planning can help. Because if you take a lot of the price we pay for inefficiencies in government, those savings can go and alleviate the problems coming from fuel and subsidy removal. Why do labor and co go up in arms whenever you want to remove this thing? It's just because of the historical thing that in the end, it's only the masses, or the masses bear the brunt of all these things because they do not see a concomitant sacrifice on the part of government. For example, aren't you going to curb your public expenditure appetite? You must give something to Nigerians. Would government officials still be riding in humongous jeeps, pay themselves salaries and allowances that do not reflect the reality on ground. Government must give something to people. That is a political decision you have to give. When you do that, then the very masses will say, oh, okay, these guys are putting their money where their mouth is. Perhaps we can go on this journey together. Because it's so important. Honestly speaking, um, the political atmosphere is so charged. Like you correctly said, there are issues to do with the elections that are arising. But we have to look beyond these things. Elections or no elections, it's a Nigerian problem. It is our problem. And we do not need to, if we light up this country, whether you are APC, PDP, or whatever you are, you all get burnt. But what we need to do is actually come together in different circles. We don't have to be in government to make the sacrifice. But we need to begin to talk to ourselves and go back and address those fundamentals, which, because we had oil money, we refused to deal with. It's this, you talked about oil selling at nearly $100 per barrel, but there's nothing to show for it here. Go to Saudi, go to the other Middle East countries, what they did with their sovereign wealth funds arising from excess crude. But here, because we just like sharing money, we just like blowing it, if this day was going to come. But like I said, the best time to plan to do something was yesterday. The next best time today.
Okay, Mr. Tommy, let me still stick with you with this question around refining capacity. Because if we are talking, and Dr. Adigun, I would also like your comments on this eventually. We are talking about removal of subsidy now on importation. On importation. And I don't think that we've had a full or enough conversation on Nigeria's refining capacity. $1.5 billion on which refinery again? Port Harcourt. NNPC and Daewoo, I think of South Korea also, $741 million to rehabilitate which refinery again? Kaduna. Now for the Port Harcourt refinery, for example, the can has been further kicked down the road many times. It was going to be ready at the end of first quarter. Now, at the end of second quarter, we've not really heard anything yet. How will this change the game, assuming that our 4 refineries work, Mr. Tommy? Then secondly, because I'd like you both to take these questions even as we close, the opportunities there if we take out fuel subsidy. For example, the petrol to gas cars conversion, because the former Minister of Petroleum Resources, State for Petroleum Resources, Timi Presiva, was in 2021 or early 2022, did talk about the conversion of petrol to gas, that's for cars, that it can help ameliorate this problem. Are there opportunities there? Energy policies that would further engender and strengthening this our industry. So, Mr. Tommy, very quickly, because I'm looking at our time.
Yes, Nancy, there are huge opportunities there, but we also need to address the fundamentals. I do not understand how, as a country, we have huge oil and gas reserves, and we are still grappling with getting a bit of it to power our domestic needs. Gas is a huge problem in any which language you want to address that. Even if you convert today from petrol cars to electric cars need to be charged. Charging is all about power. 70% of our need for power is gas because it is thermal plants. Gas today is in short supply. That's why the national grid collapses from time to time. And there's been no concerted policy to deal with this issue of gas. How come we have so much gas? We can export for LNG, but we can't keep for domestic use. Homes should not be buying gas cylinders today. It's almost been it's outmodel. But we can't even pipe gases to our homes. So we need to go to the fundamentals. How do we secure our energy future? Nigerian players will do the job. I have absolute confidence in Nigerians. If you release the policy, they will go in there. They will stop the gas flares. They will do their refineries. Like Dr. Adigun said, it doesn't have to be the Dangotes. It doesn't have to be that humongous. At your 5,000 barrels a day, many Nigerians will get into the business. Give them secure access to crude oil, and they will power this country. At times, we rely too much on externalities that we have little control over, such that you are swimming in an ocean, but you are thirsty. So we need to go to those fundamentals. Once we get those fundamentals right, and I believe the incoming administration will deal with that. As I keep saying, the genius in Nigeria to be unleashed. Go and see what's happening in the banking sector. From tally number days to now Nigerian banks dominating the continent, we can get the job done. So let's just focus and keep the right focus. We kicked this can too far down the way. And by the way, if Dangote refineries, they all come in, they are not going to sell you subsidized fuel.
Exactly.
They need to recover costs. They will need to recover costs. So they will sell you as though they were selling international.
Exactly.
But it's that access to the raw materials so that you also don't go into the vagaries of importation and non-importation that might be the benefit. But we need many, 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 many more of these businesses online. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. They go over to you.
Okay, so I think I could not support more what Mr. Ifemi had mentioned. It's not the government is not known to be a good manager of resources. So for me, I would not focus on restarting our state refineries. It is to provide enabling environment for local refining. So we have, for example, we have refineries in Ibigwe, we have in
But
we
Dr.
have in
Adigo,
Ogbele.
we've spent so much money. I did reel out the numbers earlier. 1.5 billion for Port Harcourt, for example. That's rehabilitation. I won't talk of turnaround maintenances of many years ago. Some 41. Yes, you know, who is tracing? Who is taking track? Who is monitoring these? You understand what I'm saying? So should that money
I
go
do. So Nancy,
down the drain?
So the reality of the matter is that we've not gotten much return for all of these investments, and we cannot continue business as usual, right? We cannot continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. Right now, we have a lot of capacity to refine locally, right? Provide an enabling environment for businessmen to say, okay, do I want to play in the downstream sector, in the value chain of the downstream sector? Where do I want to focus on? There's a lot of capacity to refine locally. We have production, we have demand, so it's to ensure that we provide a soft landing for entrepreneurs, for businessmen, for oil and gas players to take part in local refining. And it doesn't have to be 100,000 barrel capacity. It can be 5,000 barrel capacity here, a 3,000 barrel capacity there, a 10,000 barrel capacity there. By the time you increase local production, by the time you increase local availability of petrol, naturally even the price would start to come down because it will follow the demand and supply dynamics. So I am very big advocate of ensuring local businesses to get involved in local refining. Well, whatever we want to do with our state refineries, Port Harcourt, we can decide. But so far, we've spent a lot of money. I've not gotten much results for that. It's almost become like a racket. But we can pack that aside and ensure that for us to get results, for us to ensure that we have we have products available, we reduce the pressure on our FX by constantly importing. Is to ensure that we allow for local refining to take place to kickstart our economic activities. We ensure that we have a proper system to ensure that people can get licenses. It's not only to get licenses, they have access to crude. So rather than exporting all of our crude, we're able to keep some. You have a domestic supply obligation to ensure some of this crude is retained locally and it is converted. We add value to our product rather than selling it for cheap in the international market.
Okay.
We add value to it and then we make sure it's available for local consumption. So for me, I think that I'm a big advocate of local refining. National Gas Expansion Program, the NGP program, which is saying that okay,
Dr. Odigo, it seems we're losing your connection there. Mr. Tommy, okay, it seems we've lost both of them at the same time. Okay, I just wanted to say that's the much we can take on today's edition of the program. I want to say thank you to Mr. George Etomi, who is the chairman, West Power and Gas, as well as Dr. Adigun there, who also joined us. Dr. Bola Adigun is the partner as well as West Africa Economic Advisory Leader at Deloitte and at Touche. But just before we go, I really would like to extend my sincere appreciation to the Women in Journalism Africa for the honor of recognition as one of the most powerful women journalists in Nigeria. Truly? Okay. It has really been a marathon, and each day that I appear on your TV screens, I can't but appreciate everyone who has given me their time, effort, resource, skill, and dedication. I want to thank the founder of DAR Communications PLC. I want to thank Ms. Salome Feremo, the board, the GMD of DAR Communications PLC, the chairman of DAR Communications PLC, the managing director of AIT, the staff members, my team, and all the crew members, and indeed everyone who are numerous to mention that have been along my destiny's path, who constantly, consistently show up to make this dream a reality. This recognition is for all of us, and I appreciate all your efforts. The journey doesn't end here. This reinforces my belief that no matter who and where you are, continue to fan the embers of your flame, because someday it will become a wildfire. It reinforces my tenacity, my courage, my strength, and most importantly, my dream to be not just a voice, but a voice that will resonate for solutions and for sustainable and lasting change in our world. And for those who are inspired by my work, I'll tell you something. Dream more, learn more, do more, and become more. Thank you, and let's keep being the change that we want to see. I'll see you all again tomorrow. I am Nancy Naji. Bye for now.